Tompkins Square Park, which is like a block away, is just like awash in
Kids.
late teens, early 20s, college kids, you know, and it feels to me like they're all cosplaying or something.
Yeah, like
you
it's
know?
a dress-up game. It doesn't feel like real life.
Exactly. It feels like, and there's a range of it of like late 20th century styles. You know what I mean? Because there's
hippie
also
stuff
this
has
like
come back,
70s
too.
thing
Yeah.
happening, right? Like I remember last summer there was like this kid that was always out there. He had his like electric guitar with an amp. He had on this like big fringe leather coat, like doing his best Neil Young impression, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
everybody was like out there on the lawn, and it feels like it's just become this ritual, this like countercultural ritual that you like are enacting the same ritual that your
Yeah.
parents did, you know what I mean?
If we're talking about what is art, I would only ask what is art in bourgeois modernity? You know, I always go back to a line from Trotsky on this, that a successful work of art is a protest against reality, which Adorno puts in kind of fancier words and says that even in the most sublime work of art there lies the whisper, it should be otherwise. Because if we are perfectly at ease with everything in the world, why must we keep changing it? Why must we keep adding to it? You know, we're kind of cluttering it up at this point. We're crazy hoarders who keep trying to see if the next thing is going to be the thing that makes us happy, and it doesn't.
I guess we hoard everything.
It expresses the gap in life between what is given and what people feel, even if they think that they reject Enlightenment freedom or if they have no concept of theory at all, but feel there is some ought that has not been met.
What I'm interested in art isn't like what is limited to the definition of art or what's in a gallery. It is like an ontological, like relational exploration of the everyday, and that, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes to like art as a like a career that must be defined and validated and paid for by an institution, I couldn't really care less. That what the practice of art is for me is an investigation of everyday relationships.
But I do think art is fundamentally an act of representation, which is not necessarily like literally figurative representation, but that like an artwork needs to represent some sort of affect or quality that is transmitted to the viewer through its being seen, and that sort of transference of feeling is the goal.
Hello, gorgeous. Hey, where are you? I used to think that there was this like council of like what was critical that exists in the sky and like authenticated all conceptual art.
My soul is an island. My car is a Ford.
I want to be like Mike.
And I remember being like, I guess like this piece makes sense to someone. It doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, I'm pretty jaded. I didn't realize how much art history and like some fantasy art history or some fantasy of like a German elite or some fantasy of like people smarter or more sophisticated or more experienced. Now, I don't know if it's aging. I don't know if it's COVID. I don't know if it's like, you know, anything else. But right now I can novelly say that things are stupid. I think for the first time in my life, I can be like, that's fucking stupid. Because art is a mafia. That is for sure.
Yeah. What is art for? Like who, like seriously. I don't think it means much to most people. I don't think it's relevant to most people's lives.
It's maybe undead, but it's certainly not dead. People still do it. Art is still being made. People still write about it and look at it. Blockbuster shows, their audience has grown tremendously since, art became an established practice.
Some of the 750,000 souls who heeded her call seemed hypnotized. Some wept.
It's pretty mainstream now, I guess you could say. So, in that sense, no. I mean, is it vital? Maybe, maybe not. Really, the question is, are you making something that's compelling or that's contributing to an understanding of, civilization or the human condition or what have you?
I think the first part of the 20th century was about killing art, and the second half was about fucking it. That is what I've learned from Spiritual America, and I would argue for the history of postmodernism being a history of pedophilia.
Inside a beautiful person, I can tell what you're thinking. I know that you know.
Kind of conservative on the concept of art. Because, like I said, I think that a wrong turn was made in the 20th century. We might have run out of political possibilities, but god damn it, I will die on this hill of art where it's the dream of freedom. And the model for that kind of art making does not come from the later 20th century. It comes from the 19th. So
Right.
That is conservative of me, that I want to conserve that tradition of art because I believe that it had potential that hasn't been fulfilled.
Right, you're brushing history against the grain,
Yeah.
as one might say. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. My question is, was Duchamp inevitable?
Naturally, as a sort of conclusion or consequence of dehumanization of the work of art.
Where else were you going to go at that point? He was a little early, which is interesting. And you see this in the Russian avant-garde as well, that some of the more radical work from the Russian avant-garde precedes the Russian Revolution.
Well, yeah, that's a point I like to make often is that, Duchamp's Fountain and Malevich's Black Square both happen in 1917, which is also the moment, sort of the political high point of modernity.
Yeah. We will lead the proletariat to victory!
I mean, you would think that in 1917 we'd be making, glorious romantic work, and that's why I say, Duchamp was early.
Mm-hmm.
He grasped the despair and the failure and kind of the desire to kind of force the hand of history a little early. The alternate explanation for that is that he was perfectly on time, and if history had done its job, or, the Bolsheviks had done their job...
Right, that the negation of art would have been...
It would have been natural.
Right.
It would have been
You
fine.
would have, realized and negated art simultaneously in this new set of social relations that no longer have a need for a concept like art.
So this was when, art says I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, guys. I'm jumping off the cliff. I'm jumping off. You have to come with me. And then art does it, but society does not.
Follow. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone really even considers how they could be the next Duchamp or whatever these days. Like, it's just sort of like, I need my little, trick, my little move that's mine. That's just like kind of the opposite of like novelty.
I remember going to the New Museum when I was like in high school, and there was this piece, I think it was in like one of the first triennials. It was this piece where you put on 3D goggles and you're like in this 3D world of like zeros and ones, but it's all just like zeros and ones. And now it's like, that's in every 14-year-old boy's like bedroom. So like, no, I think novelty's stupid. Newness is different than novelty and like shock, I guess. What I think about most when I'm painting is like, how do you make an abstract painting in 2022? Like, how do you make an abstract painting after Ad Reinhardt?
The desire for avant-gardism, the desire to be new, the desire to break, be groundbreaking and make something completely new is actually like stifling at this point, because everyone is so stratified into their own individual positions that, you can't have a collective avant-garde when everyone's kind of like infighting, trying to like position themselves as the number one artist.
I am undoubtedly the greatest human artist of all time. It's just not even a question anymore at this point. It's just a fact.
Having been a gallerist, like I encounter that drive all the time. People are like, no, I have to do a new show, or like, that's my work. Like someone on Instagram is making the exact same shit as me, and I'm like, I have to like beat that out of people's heads. Like that's like a really toxic way of looking at things. Even though I think like progress just happens. Like progress is time. Progress is like, just movement forward, which you can't even help.
Being honest in the present and like reflecting your present condition is essential, which means you can't recreate things other people have done in the past, because things from the past are a reflection of the past.
The principal radical effect that the avant-garde has on society and has had on society doesn't take place directly in the realm of politics, but takes place in the realm of style and feeling. That is, it prepares the educated segment of a society to question the values that have been handed down.
Really, I think what a lot of the avant-garde artists were doing was, there was an impulse to make it new. The shock of the new, as Robert Hughes called it. But really, I think what they're doing is saying, well, what we were doing just wasn't working anymore. And we have to think of what's not working. It's a more of a negative approach in that sense. Like stripping away things that just aren't resonating anymore, that feel tired or feel exhausted. It's easy to get caught up in the kind of positive pursuit of really yearning for a kind of new experience or a new way of making things and art objects. But really, if you look back at it, it was all just a response to the prior movement or the prior school of thought. All of it was just either seeing themselves as adding on to it or kind of flipping it on its head to try to turn over that rock that just wasn't overturned properly.
I think it's hard to talk about the avant-garde like in this historical sense because there's not really a formal language that everybody agrees on. And that's what it was about. It was about like the language for art and having some call over what that gets to be.
I don't think progress has ever been at stake in art for me. I think that it was always like an imagined aspect of art. And it doesn't bother me that art maybe doesn't have progress. But I also do think, on the other hand, that it does if you know where to look. It is impossible for art to not be doing something new, to not be describing or reacting to new conditions. I think it is just the act of reacting that is its progress. I don't think there are there need to be like these inherent isms or political missions or anything for it to be satisfactory.
Maybe we just need to like discard this idea of newness and find a more suitable way of talk. Like we can't look at everything in the postmodern world and compare it to, or try and equate it to things in modernism, because it's just such a different world we're in. We're just in such a different world. And it's funny, I was thinking about this a lot with criticism. I don't know if you've ever read Arthur Danto's After the End of Art. It's so good. And he talks a lot about how in postmodernism, there needs to be a critic for each artist, which in many ways there are now, and that has ruined criticism, because it's like anyone who is in on, you know, the history that you're thinking about and all that shit, and like able to fully unpack someone's art is already a fan, because you wouldn't be thinking about all that shit if you weren't so obsessed with it too. And so it makes it really hard to have like the Clement Greenberg type criticism of yesteryear. But I think, I don't know, I think these are all just like challenges that we're all dealing with.
I've become too keenly aware of how I am simply the world. That I am simply bound up with the rationality of things that are happening, and that like everything that I do is an expression of something. We're mirrors. We're all mirrors. We're one big mush of agency-less mush. That is the horrifying realization that I'm not responsible for. I recognize that whatever it was terrible if it was lost. And I recognize that my entire being has no sense outside of that, and therefore I will continue to smoke until I die.
Free will, actually, for me, used to be a central question and is now a less meaningful question, because as long as the story's good enough to keep me entertained.
Exactly.
As long as the story's good enough to keep me entertained, so what? You know, does my not having control over the plot of a film decrease my enjoyment of the watching of the film?
Look. The film cannot be enjoyed quickly and simply unless there is sense. And the sense is the quadratic of virtue, which means rationality, which means like life under. I can't explain it. I mean, like there's a thousand.
Right.
The use of things. every moment you're using something to an advantage. And that advantage to which you're using something has reasons, or you can at least ask why. And in that sense, there are feet on the ground.
I do think that art is kind of at the mercy of social transformation. I do think that you could gesture towards big fundamental changes and make all these statements or artistic gestures to indicate the necessity for overcoming the distinction between the artwork in the everyday or an art object and a quotidian object or something like that. And I think that, again, as I said before, it kind of begs the question. It doesn't really resolve the issue because art as an institution is at the mercy of society writ large.
Well, I thank you for your question, but I have to say we're capitalist.
I think my default position and yours, I think we kind of share this, is that like art is unable to move forward because society is unable to move forward. Progress in art, for lack of a better term, must follow progress in society. In order for art to change, for art to do something novel, for art to better express the potentials of human freedom, society must first do so.
Yeah.
But, as people who take art seriously,
there's a real problem with that position.
Right. Like, mustn't there be some way for art to do that within the present conditions?
So that position is a real issue. And I think that if we genuinely, totally believed that, we would not devote another moment of our lives to art and simply devote our entire lives to political organization and never look at a picture again. But we don't.
Have things been exhausted? I mean, maybe. They appear that way. Maybe it's not the case in a more substantial way, but they do appear that way. I mean, if you look at all the art produced in the post-war period, it is kind of like a repetition or rehearsal of a lot of the old problems that prior historical artists were trying to flesh out or think through and since the 19th century.
Right.
When it really did kind of become a philosophical pursuit as well as an aesthetic one. We won't really overcome art or really come to an established, accepted meaning where everyone is satisfied unless if we lived in a very different period. So it does become a kind of futile exercise if you think that finally coming up with the correct definition of art without changing the context that the social and the historical context that it exists in, without changing that, you're never really gonna come to a firm understanding. I think that it's, Hegelian in that way, that you won't really truly understand what art is until you kind of transcend its necessity as like its own separate domain.
Mm-hmm.
So if we lived in a world where people, for all of a sudden, galleries and museums weren't really there anymore to kind of preserve these artifacts as art, if people treated it differently and we lived in a totally different organized society, then I think maybe we could look back at art and say, oh, that's what it was.
I think you can't say painting is dead in the same way that you can't say like literature is dead, just because it's not being done well right now doesn't mean it's impossible. And I do think it is being done well. It's just difficult to see where it could go right now.
There has been this emergent trend. Maybe this is sort of what you're talking about. I don't know if actually we've discussed specific artists, but there's this one artist, Kai Christensen Knowles. He had a show at this gallery Lomex a few months ago, and like all the paintings sold out before the show opened, right? And they're all just these like large paintings of like sort of sexualized pre-teens kind of. It's like, but I mean, it's just very easy material to like look at and be like, oh, I like that or I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
And I had kind of written it off initially. I was like, this just feels like
vapid. People think that kind of thing is vapid, right?
Yeah, kind of. Or I was like, okay, this gallery is like this cool downtown gallery in another era. Like this would have been some kind of avant-garde, like this would have been a Fluxus show or something like that. But like now we have these like kind of horny paintings, you know?
I guess that's where I'm like, okay, figuration. Like, is painting really going through, is art history going through like a period of figuration, or does Instagram just let more people see images with faces in them? And so when we encounter art on Instagram, we just see figurative painting and we assume that that's what painters are doing, that that's just what Instagram thinks is a photograph.
It seems pretty clear that at least among a certain constellation of galleries in New York, like figurative painting is definitely...
It looks the best on Instagram. It really
right, so, but you... Okay, I guess I wasn't sure if you meant that the algorithm is serving up
the algorithm
faces,
is serving up faces, yeah.
or if it's reciprocal in that the algorithm serves up faces, so then we make faces.
I think it's a little bit of both. My art doesn't look good on Instagram.
It's very clear from a market perspective that art is... Everyone likes figurative art right now. It's very clear. There's numerous circumstances why that's the case, but it's definitely from the market. Now, does the art market and what collectors' tastes truly define what the spirit of art is at a certain time? I don't think so. I think there could be a total incongruency there. So just because certain things are in vogue with the taste of collectors or with what institutions are putting up on display may not necessarily get at like these more core questions that you're asking, which is, you know, art's vitality or what the true definition of art is or should be. You know, I think that more of that is a bit in line with what people are into in a fashion sense or what the current fads are of the day.
I couldn't care less about most painting. If you're using painting today, it better be justified in a particularly interesting way. Like it must be doing something that is, piercingly critical of the medium itself in a way that has been done, which is really hard and rare to do.
It's impossible, I think.
But it's just like I when I think of like painting or traditional media, I think it has almost no relationship to that type of art I'm describing, which is this, which is the relationships at work between mostly everyday objects and people and whatever.
No, I mean, there's just certain shows that I'm like, wow, there's no reason. Painting, there is a reason. Representing things, there's a reason for that. Making pretty things and that type of playing that happens in painting, like, is something that can exist always. Even the most successful artists, David Lynch or Jim Carrey, will throw their entire careers away to just become fucking painters. Which kind of sucks, but every single artist, no matter what, at the end of the day, wants to be a painter. It's kind of an annoying truth, but it's true.
Yeah, Do you have any theory as to why that is?
I don't know, the type of play and painting, it responds to you well. There's like just the right amount of material. There's just the right amount of certainty. And there's also just the right amount of like historical, mystical truth in it.
I don't think artists will ever be able to exhaust, an apple on a table or a glass of water on a table. Like, those things are always going to be sort of approached. There's a tree, and you paint a tree, and like accuracy is not the process of representing the tree on a canvas. And I think that's like Cézanne's thing, is that he, drove himself crazy because he like truly wanted in a not illusionistic way to capture the real visceral like thing itself on a canvas, which is of course impossible. But that process, the movement of the real thing and the representation of the thing, I think is a process that is basically irreducible and kind of infinite.
We went to Seth Cameron's show at Nathalie Karg back in 2019, and someone was just like, what even is like a painting? And like the question of, is it just a painted surface? Like is, this paintbrush handle that is painted, is this a painting? And that question of when you try and put a boundary around, or like try and make any rules for what counts as painting or not painting, everything falls apart. And so everything in art, in terms of like how we come to conclusions, like social conclusions about, yes, being a mayor is art, no, it's not. Yes, that paintbrush is a painting, no, it's not. I mean, I think you and I would both agree that is not a painting. And so where those boundaries come together, it mirrors the function of language, in that we both agree that the word shoe means this, and it's like a social agreement.
When we believed the Earth was flat, or we believed in a geocentric model of the universe, it's not that they were actually wrong. The Earth was the center of the universe, and the Earth was flat. Just as now it's a sphere, because that is the model that best supports human activity. It's the model that best supports our ability to be in the world. I have no doubt that we will discover some as yet unforeseen principle of the universe that says the Earth is not a sphere, or that it exists on some other crazy kind of plane, dimension, whatever, that we have just not yet been able to account for. But it doesn't matter, because everything that we do operates on that model, and it operates just fine.
Your real life, flat Earth experience of life is never going to be 100% accounted for by any scientific theory, whether social, cultural, scientific, whatever. Walking through the room is never going to match up with all of your equations. And so I am very against painting that tries to position itself as like this like thing, one and done, whether it's the experience of the color red, or it's about the, like women in society. Like a painting will never end at either, it will never end theoretically at the place you want it to, And so like accounting for that messiness, that like in between, I feel like is something I love in painting, and that makes it like great.
So I think the social practice artists want a better world, which I hew so closely to art in modernity that I'm perfectly sympathetic to that. And they don't see anything else delivering it, so they say, well, I might as well do this.
I don't do something for the community. I do something, I hope, for art.
I mean, I think the thing with most like contemporary conceptualism is that it seems to be like people who have the style of conceptualism down pat, but instead of making concepts, they're going to like shoehorn in like a political moral, which I fundamentally think is simply a like misunderstanding of art. Like I don't think a specific, like I don't think having a like moral of the story is like an acceptable goal.
And yeah, I guess you can call Cameron Rowland like an activist artist, but I think he's someone who's doing it well. I think also the way he's flipping the script on minimalism, because a lot of his work presents as minimalist, and it becomes less about how your body responds to the objects in the moment, but how those objects dictate how bodies are used on like a larger scale, or how those objects dictate how bodies are used on a larger scale. I'm not saying that I love all political work. I think art is political, always.
I think I'm like very uninterested in the sort of art that has such an obvious point. That like a point, or just that turns it into like a closed loop. That like you get like art that functions as a joke or something, or as just a statement with a period. It has no open ends that, you know, sort of provoke questioning or interpretation or whatever, that are meant to be so understood. They don't really interest me as art. Maybe they interest me as they don't interest me.
I mean, I think that people are like kind of disillusioned at being disillusioned. That's kind of, I think, what it is. And I don't know, maybe the only way to move forward is to kind of be optimistic. I don't know.
Do I think art can liberate society when society cannot liberate itself? No, not at all. But art wants to, and it has a reason to want to, because that is part of what art is in modern society, that it's an exercise in freedom and becoming. The problem is the real productive moment is that tension and that contradiction, when it hits that wall. The art wants to liberate society, it realizes that it can't. That's the moment it can really emerge.
Yeah.
But when it starts to kind of cosplay liberating society, then we're lost.
I'm not even thinking about the future that hardcore. I'm just trying to like remove like the weird petty insecurities that I have in art, in ambition, where I'm like, I still want to be in that fucking room. Like, I know the room doesn't have shit in it, but I want to be in that fucking room. I have that in me a little bit, and it sucks. No, we all know that selling coconuts by the beach is the answer to happiness, but we don't do it.
The default, like, new spiritualism, new wellness, whatever, is like, all of this is bad. How can I escape from it? Rather than like this transformation, right? It's like the possibility of transformation has just like evaporated, right? There is no longer a possibility of transformation. The best we can do is like shop at Whole Foods and like worship goddesses or whatever.
And I have to say, if we're being very sober and honest with ourselves, they might be right. There might be no more possibility of transformation. Whether there's really a possibility of transforming society toward human freedom, I think we have to be as skeptical of as we are of that. Do I want it more? Is it infinitely more desirable? Yes.
Yeah. Right. Like, I don't know. I don't think that I could... I don't think I could adopt that standpoint and feel like anything other than a traitor, you know?
Yeah,
or like just I've lost, I've resigned.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's kind of where I am. I mean, I've thought about it. I've thought, like, what would I say to someone as, like, how should you find meaning in your life in this world if I've kind of also resigned? And I would say, find God.
Yeah, that's what it has to be.
Yeah.
It's either, I mean, that's the thing. It's either God or nihilism.
Yeah. And it's too
or
late
Soul
for God.
Cycle.
Yeah. I can't do God. I'm not going to do Soul Cycle. Nihilism it is.
Maybe the conclusion of this documentary is that I don't give a fuck about art.
I know.